Well, oddly enough, this week marks 3 years since I made the very first video about the Husqvarna 55 Performance Series. I was on the mountain down there in Summers County. It was February 15th, 2021, whenever I made that first video about getting some feelers out there to see how the Husqvarna customization thing would go. Ended up making 3 videos while I was up there, just trying some different stuff. And whenever the spring came, the business took back over and the big stuff took over. The typical mowers in the spring, a lot of ATVs, side-by-sides. Since that time, I've done Polaris certification, an Indian motorcycle certification. But things changed and I left the shop up there whenever I moved from there. Went down, started the Red Shed power saws for a while. And that was when the TikTok started up. The TikTok took off really well and did that for a while, and it got monetized. YouTube took the back burner. Occasionally I would put some videos over on the here if I thought about it, but it wasn't the priority that TikTok was. Now we've decided to move again, and I'm going to build a shop up here close to the house. And until then, I'm going to work right here and do a lot of saws and small stuff. And as spring comes, we'll take it on out and do some bigger stuff while we're building the new shop. Point is, I saw a video a while back, a few weeks ago. Well, what had happened was I got stuck with this 51. A guy had brought a saw to the shop and he was wanting to build a 51. He brought his other one there for repair, or a 55. He was like, if you can find one for under $100 somewhere, get me one. And I waited around, and like a couple weeks later found one on eBay, and should have asked him first, but I went ahead and grabbed it. And this was like, last year. And then I found out I didn't hear anything from him after I told him I got it. A month or two went by, and then I found out that he bought some brand new saws, which were fine. But anyway, so while I was posting that video, Bodie saw it and mentioned that he was doing a competition for all of the 55s at his place in Georgia, and suggested that this become one of the saws for the competition. And it was cool because I had saw something that he had made a couple years ago, and he was talking about the videos that I had made about doing the 028 swap before he had ever tried it. And it was the Moose something saws whenever it was elk knob. And anyway, it's just funny how things come back full circle. So here we are 3 years after the first one again, and this saw here is going to end up getting built for the competition. But before we do anything, we have to pick a cylinder and a piston combination to go inside of it. And we have a different selection of things here. We have a Farmer Tech cylinder with an 028 Super and a 9,000th base gasket that would be required to get the clearance on that. Whereas most of the aftermarket Farmer Tech cylinders, you can put any of these pistons in with no base gasket and not have any interference and still have 35 thousandths, 40 thousandths squish. Have not checked the squish on this setup here, but I've done the one 028 conversion while I was on the mountain, and I had the spec numbers for that one, did a video on it, and it had the timing and stuff on it. And I kept that saw for a little while, and then it got sold. But now I have a few 55s there to be built. We got different chassis, things to be done. One of the 55s is probably going to get put back together in a stock, as close as we can to stock. And then that's like a base model tester that we'll have against other things. As far as this one here, I don't have machining capabilities, but I have a file, so we may file some off the bottom of the cylinder. It comes to that. I believe I'm going to take some JB Weld and modify the transfers, change them up a little bit. Probably do a timing advance. Bodie was telling me that you needed to bring these things up a few degrees to wake them up. I haven't done that to one yet. We'll try that. Probably a carburetor modification. Don't think I'll go with a bigger one off of a 62cc China saw, and then I have a 365 carb that I could add an impulse tube for, but might just end up keeping the 55. Try to keep this thing as close to what somebody could do at their house just modifying stuff and changing things without having to buy too much. There's in the works talking to a couple people that might end up sponsoring a couple things for this, and those guys will be you'll be able to buy that stuff online if they send their stuff this way, and I'll advertise it and it'll be used and put on the saw as well. But today, like I said, we're going to check some pistons, we're going to time them out, I'm going to weigh them, compare them to each other, and decide which one we want to use for this one going forward. Okay, this is the Farmertech piston, Farmertech cylinder. We're going to check this timing wheel. I'm going to take 10 thousandths feeler gauge, continue on past top dead center. As soon as it gets down there where it's open, I'm going to check it. Right there in the center of the port, the high point, looking like 106. For the transfers, we're taking this piece here. It's coming in from the side. And that way, we'll be able to see what's going on with that. Right at 125. Once we're at bottom dead center, we'll come on around to our intake opening. Around 68. And 69 is what the stock one is. It's the only difference. The stock one opens a little bit sooner. Okay, next we're going to pull this cylinder off and we're going to get this flat top piston from Duke's in here, the coated Duke's piston. Well, we checked our wheel and it's good, so let's get on with it. It's like 106. 125. About 68. After I got to looking at all of these, pretty much the flat tops, and you got the Highway, the Duke, they all timed the same. Even the pop-up timed the same. The length on the skirt and stuff was pretty close to the same. The squish on this one was oddly enough a little bit lower, but if we're going to use one, it's either going to be the pop-up. It does weigh a little bit more, but there's the 028 set up over here, and we're going to slap that on there and time it and see what kind of squish it has, and go from there. But if we're going to use one of the flat tops, then we're going to have to take a file and probably take some off of the bottom of the cylinder. And I don't know, there's a lot of options, a lot of routes it can go. This is the 028 Super. Had to open the inside of it up for it to even fit on here. They're about 40 thousandths too small. 028 Super piston, Farmertech cylinder with a 10 thousandths custom made base gasket. Let's check his squish. Well, that's marking at about 22. looking like about 110, that base gasket in there. $129, about 74. With the 028 Super setup and the shim down there, though, you can see a little spot right there on the piston where the spark plug is. When you go all the way past, it's mashing it down. So you either have to stack this plug out with some washers, or maybe make a little spot there, which would kind of defeat the purpose unless we were to just knock that whole edge down and around. Still have to decide, though, probably ought to check this pop-up for good measure, because that's the other option with our other Farmer Tech cylinder. So this is the highway pop-up piston, and I checked it. It's getting pretty well near the same numbers on it. 106. This is no base gasket, say as a stock cylinder. 125. And about 68. Did want to check the squish on this thing. I think it's around 35 thousandths. So there's a potential to shave the bottom of the cylinder if we were going to go this route and use this one. And the only way that I can shave it is with a file, do it by hand. And y'all might say, that's crazy. And I thought it was crazy at first, but it's all I know to do. All right, like you can see there, that's not quite, it was pretty hard to turn that 22 thousandths by hand for the 028. That's about 35 thousandths on the pop-up. It's about 40 thousandths on one of the Farmer Tech ones, I think. And I have a scored stock one here, but they all run close to each other. And with the timing on this one being pretty well the same, either grind the base of this one or start probably with this shim and not do anything to it, and then just grind and work the transfers from there and use the 028. I'll tell you why I am leaning towards the pop-up and this though. Well, you can see with the ports being open here, and that's required for the competition, open port cylinder. You have your 028, you have these windows here naturally through it, okay? So as it's coming into the port there, it's open and allowing stuff to come in from this side, from the back side, in through where this center and into the port and over the top of the piston. With the pop-up, it is a solid wall, and you won't have that coming in from the center, and all of your flow will be coming up from the bottom instead of possibly coming in here in all these different directions. Well, why does that matter? Well, because a complaint on these open cylinders is, they're going with the closed cylinder, and you have things like barrier layer and slowing of the flow. And with this solid wall in here, my buddy Jonathan said that it could create the barrier layer effect and help it along. I've heard that some guys are going to try to fill these things up with JB Weld, and I thought I might do the same. I'm not going to fill it solid and try to create new ones, but after talking to him, I may start back in this corner down here and start working it in an angle back to here. And then that way, as the flow comes up out of the crankcase, it is going to be, it gets smaller as it goes up through here through the transfer, so it'll be blocked off. What you can't see, or what's open there by my finger, will be the blocked part with the JB weld. And it'll direct the flow up into here and up on the intake side, away from the heat of the exhaust side, away from pre-detonation or any stuff like that, and up into the combustion chamber. Just an idea, something to try for the competition. Well, that's all I have for today. By the next video, we'll have selected which setup we're going to use. Thought about if I don't use the 028 setup and decide to go with the pop-up and shaving down the piston or shaving down the cylinder, I may take the 028 in that cylinder and put it on another one of the Husqvarna chassis I have around here and not do any grinding on it. Just put it back together the way it is. If you had only taken it apart, taken the stock piston out of it, put the 028 in it with the 9/1000 face gasket and motor seal, and just see how it runs, you know, stock timing. See if it makes any difference than the stock saw, and have that as a comparison base. That's what we were wanting to do 3 years ago, and that's what we can do now. Pretty much as we want to. We've got plenty of platforms, opportunities for parts. Probably next video I'll have confirmation from 2 possible sponsors, and be able to get their stuff in here, and it'll be part of the build and stuff that you could purchase for your saw, and performance upgrades for it.